All right, so today we're diving deep into some really cool music.
Yeah.
And a pretty complex political landscape.
Very much so.
We're looking at Congolese Rhumba and how it was influenced by, well, you could say shaped by, Mobutu Sese Seko's rule in Zaire.
That's right.
We're pulling all our info from Daateku channel. They always have the most interesting stories about African music.
Absolutely. They really dig deep into those stories.
So get ready for a trip back in time.
Back to Zaire.
To see how politics and music were like totally intertwined.
How they influenced daily life there.
Exactly. Okay, let's start with Mobutu Sese Seko. Ruled Zaire for, what was it, 3 decades? Something like that?
Yeah, a little over that. Late 60s to late 90s.
Wow. That's a long time. And his legacy, well, it's complicated.
It really is. Dictator, definitely.
Right.
But he also wanted to unify the nation, had this vision.
So where does Congolese Rhumba fit into all of this?
Mobutu, he knew Rhumba was popular, right?
Yeah, super popular.
So he used that to create like a unified Zairean identity. It wasn't just about the music itself, but like a tool.
A tool for what? Like nation building?
Exactly.
Wow.
Like there's this song, Celebrons Mobutu.
Okay.
Played at rallies on the radio, everywhere basically.
So you're always hearing this, seeing Mobutu's image.
Yeah, and that music kind of cements it, makes him the father of the nation.
And like build right into the music itself.
Exactly.
So it was almost a form of propaganda then.
You could say that. It definitely served a political purpose.
But for those of us who aren't familiar, what exactly is Congolese Rhumba?
Okay, imagine this. You've got the rhythms of Cuban sun,
Okay, I'm with you.
but you blend that with the melodies of traditional Congolese music.
Interesting mix.
Yeah, and it's vibrant, it's energetic, it's super danceable.
I bet.
In Zaire, it was huge culturally.
Way more than just like background music.
Oh yeah, way more.
Mobutu saw that, I guess, and decided to tap into it.
Definitely did. But did he like totally control the music scene?
Yeah, that's a good question. Was there any pushback?
I mean, his influence was there. Strong, you know? But there were some dissenting voices.
Oh, really?
Who, for instance?
Franco Luambo. Some of his songs, they seemed like praise for the regime.
Okay, I see.
But if you listen closely, there were these metaphors.
Sneaky.
Yeah. Critiquing corruption, inequality, all hidden in plain sight.
So music, even under a dictator, can still have this power.
Absolutely.
It's like more than blind praise, there's a hidden message.
Exactly. Some say Mobutu ended up stifling the music.
Really?
But I think it's way more complicated than that. Sure, he promoted certain artists, shaped things.
Right.
But there was still room for creativity, even dissent. Just had to be subtle.
That's why. So you said earlier that Congolese Rhumba was more than just music. What was daily life like in Zaire back then? Like, how was the music a part of it?
Picture this. You walk into a Kinshasa nightclub.
Right. There.
The place is jumping, music's blasting, latest rumba hits.
Sounds fun.
Everyone's dressed up, so pure fashion, doing the kwasa kwasa dance.
The energy must have been incredible. Oh yeah, electric. Rhumba was everywhere. Influenced fashion, dance, how people talk.
And really was the sound of Zaire. Yeah.
Exactly. It reflected life there, but it also shaped it.
It's amazing how music can do that. And
Yeah.
even cross borders.
Yeah, totally.
So beyond Zaire, what kind of impact did this blend of music and politics have?
Oh, it went far. Across Africa, really. Influenced other music styles, started cultural movements. Zaire became a cultural powerhouse.
Wow,
And the music, it was a shared language, connected people from all different backgrounds.
that's powerful.
It really is.
So we've covered Mobutu's strategy with Rhumba, its impact on life in Zaire, and its reach across Africa. It's hard not to think about Mobutu's legacy. How do we even sum that up?
Honestly, it's tough. He
Yeah.
boosted Congolese Rhumba for sure, got international attention.
Right.
But controlling the music scene, well, that had downsides too. Could talk about this forever, honestly.
It is a complicated story. It makes me wonder, though, how has Congolese Rhumba changed since Mobutu's fall?
Yeah.
Did it keep that political edge, or did it go in a totally new direction?
That's a good question.
Something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the world of Congolese Rhumba. It's been fascinating.
It really has. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Welcome in, everybody, to this deep dive. We're doing something different. We're going deep into the heart of Congolese rumba.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, and today we're going way beyond just the music itself. We're really going to try to explore this fascinating connection between Congolese rumba and Mobutu Sese Seko's rule in Zaire.
That is a really interesting connection.
It is, yeah. And our sources are this blend of history and cultural analysis, but they're all really focused on the same thing, like how Congolese rumba got so intertwined with power in that time and place. And it's just such a fascinating story, because we're really going to see how a genre of music that is known for its vibrancy could thrive under a dictatorship.
Yeah, what's so interesting about that to me is this whole connection between music, which we often see as a symbol of freedom and expression, and then an authoritarian regime. It really makes you think differently about how art functions in society.
Totally. It's like the opposite of what you'd expect, right? So to set the scene for everybody, imagine you're in a Kinshasa nightclub, like La Crèche, straight out of our sources.
Okay.
And it's smoky, it's dimly lit, you hear the sounds of rumba all around you, couples are dancing, it's lively. But beneath that surface, there's a whole other story unfolding.
I can picture it, yeah.
Yeah, and to understand it,
you really need to grasp how important Congolese rumba was at the time. This wasn't just, some popular music. This was like a cultural force across Africa. I mean, it even got recognized by UNESCO as intangible cultural heritage.
Wow.
So we're talking about something that's really, deeply embedded in the culture.
Yeah, and yet this is existing alongside this dictatorship. How does that even work?
Well, that's where the story of Franco Luambo Macchiati comes in. He was this legendary Congolese rumba musician. And his career, I think, really shows us how artists were navigating Mobutu's regime, early on. Franco wasn't afraid to get political at all. He even had some songs that got banned by the authorities. Yeah, one that really stands out is the song called Liwa ya Lumumba. It's basically lamenting the death of Patrice Lumumba after Mobutu's coup.
So he's making these pretty bold statements with his music at that time. But what happens when Mobutu actually comes to power? Do things change for Franco?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The whole political landscape shifted dramatically. And for musicians, showing allegiance to the regime became basically mandatory if you wanted to have any kind of career.
Wow. So how does that play out in Franco's music? Do we see a shift in his style or what he's actually saying?
Yeah, you see a very clear transformation. Franco starts composing these songs that are directly praising Mobutu. They're almost like anthems, Au commandement, Keridana Biso Mobutu. Those are some prime examples. There are even images out there of him and his band, Tipioke Jazz, performing in Mobutu's party uniforms. It's a very striking visual of how music was being used for political purposes.
That's a powerful image. It makes you wonder, what was going through Franco's mind at that point? Was he truly supportive, or was it more about survival?
That is a question that historians and music scholars still debate, Yeah. But we have to consider the context, right? Mobutu was trying to reshape Zairean identity completely. He renamed the country, introduced a new anthem, and he was using rumba as this tool to promote his own policies.
So it's all part of this larger strategy, and Franco's music, whether by choice or necessity, is becoming a part of that. Are there any examples of how that played out with specific policies?
Well, one example that is really striking is Franco's song Salongo. It was promoting Mobutu's policy of mandatory community work. So you've got this catchy rumba tune encouraging people to participate in government-mandated labor. It's fascinating. You can see how music was used to influence public opinion.
Yeah, I can almost hear it playing in the streets, weaving its way into people's lives. But it wasn't all just about these overt displays of support for Mobutu, was it? Our sources mentioned something called Labanga, which seems like a more subtle way that music and power were intersecting.
Yeah, Labanga. That was this practice where musicians would shout out the names of wealthy or powerful individuals during their performances. It's kind of like a musical shout out. But it wasn't just for fun.
I was going to say there's got to be more to it.
Oh, yeah.
What was the point?
Well, it was often done in exchange for favors, money or even protection. It really highlights this whole patronage system that thrived under Mobutu. If you wanted to succeed as a musician, you had to play by the rules. You had to acknowledge the power brokers.
So even the seemingly joyful music has this undercurrent of navigating power dynamics. It just adds another layer to that scene at La Crèche that we were imagining, the dancing, the music, but also this awareness of who's watching, who's being acknowledged.
Exactly. It complicates the picture quite a bit. And while Franco's story is really central to this whole thing, he wasn't alone. There were other musicians too, like Taboulé Rochereau. He also had songs praising Mobutu. Candidate Ya MPR Mobutu is one.
Okay, it seems like there's this perception that all Congolese music from that era was pro-Mobutu, and it's all lumped together under this term soukous. Is that accurate?
Not entirely. Soukous is a term that's sometimes used, but it doesn't really capture the full complexity of Congolese music during this period. There was a lot of variety. A lot of artists were exploring different styles and sounds.
So it wasn't this monolithic scene. There were other things happening, other stories being told.
Absolutely, and that's important to remember.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the range of experiences in that music scene. Because while some artists were, publicly praising Mobutu, we have to think about this idea of agency too. Was it all just, blind obedience? Or was there some nuance to how music and power were interacting?
Yeah, it's such a layered question, right? On the one hand, you have these seemingly straightforward pro-Mobutu anthems, but then there's that element of Lubanga. And, Franco had that history of politically charged songs, even before Mobutu came to power.
Exactly. And if we kind of dig a bit deeper, we do find some hints of resistance, these subtle critiques, even a touch of sly humor woven into the music.
So it wasn't always as straightforward as it might have seemed on the surface. These musicians were walking a fine line.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Yeah.
They had to find a way to please the regime, but also express themselves authentically. It was a real tightrope walk.
And that makes me think about Lubanga again. You were saying it was about favors and patronage, but could it have been used in more subversive ways too?
Some scholars argue exactly that. They say that Lubanga wasn't just about, getting on the good side of the powerful. It could be this form of social commentary. By calling out these individuals, musicians might have been subtly criticizing them, exposing corruption, but making it look like they were praising them.
That's incredible. Hiding a message in plain sight. It speaks to the ingenuity of these artists, finding ways to push those boundaries within a really constrained system.
It does. And it brings us back to Franco. Given his earlier work, do you think he genuinely supported Mobutu? Or was there something more strategic going on?
It's hard to say for certain, but it is tempting to kind of read between the lines a bit. Maybe his later songs were more about self-preservation, a way to, stay in Mobutu's good graces and keep making music.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. But remember, Franco was known for his wordplay and those double meanings. So it's not impossible that he was using his music to subtly critique the regime while appearing to support it. It could have been a way to have his voice heard without putting himself in danger.
Yeah, that makes sense. It must have been this constant balancing act, staying true to their art, but also navigating the political reality.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to understand that this wasn't a black and white situation. There were shades of gray, different motivations, individual choices being made within a very specific context.
It makes you wonder how the audience perceived all of this. How did ordinary Congolese people interpret these songs? Did they kind of see through the layers, or did they take it all at face value?
That's a great question. And it's likely that different people had, different interpretations. Some might have seen it as genuine praise for Mobutu. Others might have picked up on those subtle critiques, those hidden messages. It probably depended on their own experiences, their political leanings, their understanding of the musician, and their past work.
So the music itself becomes this reflection of the complexities of life in Zaire under Mobutu. It's not just entertainment, it's a conversation. It's a way to engage with the realities of authoritarian rule, whether subtly or directly.
Exactly, and that's what makes this deep dive so interesting. It's not just about the music itself, it's about how that music intersects with politics and power, and that human desire to express yourself, even when things are really tough.
And speaking of those different expressions, we've been talking a lot about Franco, and those who seem to align with Mobutu's message. But we talked earlier about how there was a lot of variety in the Congolese music scene. What was happening outside of that sphere?
Oh, there was a lot going on. Figures like Franco and Taboulé were very prominent, but they were part of a larger ecosystem. There were all these other artists experimenting with different styles and sounds, pushing the boundaries of Congolese music. They might not have been as explicitly political, but they were still contributing to the richness and diversity of the scene.
So even though the political context was obviously influencing the music, it didn't completely stifle creativity and innovation. There were still artists finding ways to kind of explore their own paths.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. It reminds us that even under a regime like Mobutu's, there were these pockets of resistance, different ways of being, different stories being told. It really speaks to the resilience of art, its ability to kind of transcend challenging circumstances.
And it's also important to remember that this was a time of immense hardship for a lot of Congolese people. Mobutu's regime was notoriously corrupt and brutal.
Absolutely. And while some musicians might have benefited from their connections to power, many others really struggled to survive. You know, the music might have offered a temporary escape, a moment of joy, but it couldn't erase the realities of life under a dictatorship.
Yeah, it really puts things in perspective that even amidst such a vibrant music scene, you can't ignore those political realities. Makes you think about the bigger picture here. Like, what does the story from Mobutu's Zaire tell us about the role of music in society, especially under authoritarian rule?
Yeah, it raises a lot of questions. Like, is music a tool for control or a form of resistance? Or can it be both? I think looking at Congolese Rhumba during that period, you see that it can be all those things, and often at the same time.
Yeah, it's complex, and it really makes you think differently about the music we encounter even today. Like, how can we be more informed listeners, more aware of those historical and political contexts?
Well, I think it starts by recognizing that music is never created in a vacuum. It's always a product of its time, shaped by the social and political forces at play. And that's not just true for Congolese Rhumba. That's true for all music from every era.
That's so true. It makes me think about all the media we consume today. We're bombarded with messages constantly, and a lot of them have these subtle political undertones.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's like advertising, social media, even the news.
It's all shaped by agendas and perspectives and power dynamics.
Exactly.
And I think just like we were trying to unpack those layers in Congolese Rhumba, we need to apply that same critical thinking to the media we encounter in our own lives.
Right.
Who benefits from these narratives? Whose voices are being amplified? And whose are being silenced?
It's like a call to be more aware, to look beyond just the surface, and really consider the intentions and the impact of what we're consuming.
Absolutely. And to recognize that just like Congolese Rhumba wasn't just about catchy tunes, the media we see today is often layered with meaning. And it's about being aware of those layers and engaging with them thoughtfully.
So where do we go from here? How do we take these insights from Mobutu's Zaire and apply them to our own world, to our own relationship with music and media?
For me, it's about being aware of how power operates, even in places that seem apolitical, like music and entertainment. It's about questioning our assumptions, digging deeper, and just engaging with art and media more critically.
Yeah, being more informed.
Exactly.
And remembering that music can be so much more than just entertainment. It can be a powerful form of expression, a reflection of society, a way to process really complex emotions and experiences.
Yeah.
It can even be a voice for the voiceless and a catalyst for change.
That's powerful. I hope this deep dive has given you a new perspective, not just on Congolese Rhumba, but on the music and media you encounter every day.
Yeah, it's definitely a reminder that music can be a source of joy, but also a powerful force for social and political commentary, even in really challenging times.
So keep listening, keep exploring, and keep asking questions. The world of music is full of fascinating stories.
So well said. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the heart of Congolese Rhumba. We hope you learned something new and that it left you with a lot to think about. Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the world of Congolese Rhumba.
Nice.
And this is a story that really takes us to the heart of Mobutu Sese Seko's Zaire.
Okay.
So think Kinshasa.
Yeah.
Bustling nightlife and music so infectious, it seems to defy the shadow of a dictatorship.
Yeah, it's really quite a paradox, right?
Yeah.
We're looking at these sources and, you see this brutal regime.
Right.
And alongside it, you have this flourishing music scene that became the soundtrack of daily life and even, achieved international fame.
Yeah, and we've got excerpts here that talk about a book called Rhumba Rules.
Oh, cool.
And vivid descriptions of that music scene, and even some some insights into Mobutu's reign.
Wow.
It's a lot to unpack, but I'm really curious how this kind of joyful, dance-inducing music can not only exist, but thrive under these circumstances.
You know, the key might lie in understanding how Mobutu, despite his, very strict rule, strategically used music and culture to solidify his power. And that famous quote of his, happy are those who sing and dance, that wasn't just empty rhetoric.
Okay, so let's try to picture this.
Yeah.
Our sources describe Kinshasa's legendary La Crèche nightclub. Couples swirling to the rhythms, musicians in flamboyant attire.
Yeah.
The energy palpable. It just paints a picture of pure joy.
And that image, I think, is crucial. Yeah. Mobutu understood the power of that joy. He promoted Congolese music, sometimes called soukous or Rhumba or Zarwa or Snouli, as a national treasure, pushing it onto the global stage.
Yeah.
But all the while, he was using it to subtly reinforce his control.
So it wasn't just about enjoying the music, it was about controlling the narrative around it.
Exactly. And you see this in how musicians were often obligated to show their allegiance to Mobutu.
Yeah.
Take Franco Luambo Macchiati, known as Franco, a giant of Congolese rumba.
Right.
He even composed songs directly promoting Mobutu's policies.
Wow.
There's one called Candidat na Biso Mobutu, which was used for the 1984 elections.
That's pretty blatant, isn't it? I mean, to go from making music to basically making campaign jingles.
It was a delicate dance for musicians like Franco.
Yeah.
Earlier in his career, he even composed a song lamenting the death of Patrice Lumumba, a political figure who opposed Mobutu. But as Mobutu tightened his grip, many artists, including Franco, seemingly adapted, becoming state-sponsored musicians.
That makes you wonder if this shift in Franco's music was genuine support or a calculated move for survival. I mean, speaking out against Mobutu was incredibly dangerous.
It's impossible to know for sure. But what's fascinating is that this mirroring of Mobutu's charismatic authoritarianism also played out within the music scene itself. This system of La Banca, where musicians would call out names of influential people during performances in exchange for support. Well, it's a lot like how Mobutu rewarded those who displayed loyalty.
Hold on, break that down for me. How does a shout-out in a song connect to Mobutu's style of rule?
Think of it this way. Mobutu maintained his power by rewarding those who publicly showed him allegiance. Right? Well, in the music scene, a musician calling out a powerful figure's name was essentially a public display of allegiance, often rewarded with financial support or protection.
I see.
It created this system of dependence that echoed Mobutu's own tactics.
So even within the music world, there was this unspoken pressure to conform to play the game in order to thrive.
Absolutely. And it highlights how Congolese music, while a source of joy and expression, also became a reflection of and a tool within the existing power structure.
We've talked about Franco, but our sources mentioned other big names like Tabule Rochereau. Was he involved in this political dance as well? Did his music ever cross that line from entertainment into propaganda?
Tabule Rochereau is a fascinating figure. He, like Franco, found himself navigating the complexities of making music under Mobutu. While perhaps not as overtly political as some of Franco's work, his music did at times align with the regime's messaging, particularly around themes of national unity and cultural pride. It's a great example of how even seemingly apolitical art could become entangled with the political realities of the time.
For sure. It's amazing how Congolese music managed to walk that tightrope between artistic expression and political maneuvering. But before we dive deeper into that, I'm curious about the roots of this music. Our sources trace its origins back to colonial times and the influence of Cuban rumba.
That's right before Mobutu Kinshasa was already this melting pot of musical styles. Imagine this. During the colonial period, Cuban rumba makes its way across the Atlantic. It lands in Congo.
Wow.
Local musicians hear this new sound and they're captivated, but instead of just copying it, they infuse it with their own traditional instruments and melodies.
So they took this foreign influence and made it their own, adding a uniquely Congolese twist.
Exactly, and that's a recurring theme in Congolese music. This ability to absorb and reinterpret, to constantly evolve. And speaking of evolution, we can't forget the emergence of the big bands. like African jazz and OK jazz.
Yeah.
They were powerhouses that shaped the sound of a generation.
You're talking about the bands that launched legends like Franco, right?
Yes, Franco's OK jazz was a major player, but let's not forget African jazz.
Right.
Led by Joseph Kabasele, often called the father of modern Congolese music.
Wow.
They were pioneers,
Yeah.
the first full-time orchestra to record and perform, and their music had a real impact.
Yeah.
Their hit Independence Cha-Cha became an anthem not only for Congo's independence, but for similar movements across Africa.
Wow. Talk about a song capturing the spirit of a moment.
Yeah,
So you have these big bands, incredible musicians, and then on top of that, the political landscape is changing. That must have had a huge impact on the music.
absolutely. These bands weren't just musical groups.
Yeah.
They were hotbeds of talent, often reflecting the changing social and political dynamics. Many musicians who would later become stars got their start in these orchestras.
Our sources also mention that the rivalry between OK jazz and African jazz was legendary.
Oh, yeah.
Was it purely musical, or was there a political dimension to it as well?
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
On the surface, it was a classic musical rivalry,
Right.
pushing both bands to innovate and refine their sound. But you can't discount the political undercurrents, especially as Mobutu consolidated his power and sought to control various aspects of Congolese society, including music.
Right.
Imagine the pressure these bands felt, knowing that their music, their livelihoods, were intertwined with the whims of a dictator.
That must have been incredibly difficult for the artists. So while the music was evolving, the political context was adding another layer of complexity shaping the direction of the music scene.
Exactly. It's like a dance between creative expression and political survival. It's important to note that the evolution of Congolese music wasn't just about internal dynamics.
Yeah.
It was also shaped by external influences, particularly American music.
Okay.
Our sources mention the impact of American rock, funk, and soul, especially on the younger generation of Congolese musicians.
I can see how those genres, with their energy and emphasis on rhythm, would resonate with the Congolese music scene.
Think about it. You have these young musicians in Kinshasa listening to the sounds of James Brown, Jimi Hendrix, Sly, and the Family Stone.
Right.
They're absorbing these influences, blending them with their own musical traditions, creating something entirely new.
And out of that fusion came soukous, right? A faster, more guitar-driven sound that really took off globally.
Exactly. Soukous took the foundation of Congolese rumba and injected it with a shot of adrenaline.
Yeah.
Bands like Zyko Longa Longa were at the forefront of this new wave,
Right.
incorporating elements of rock and funk, becoming incredibly popular both within Congo and internationally. And what's interesting is that soukous itself is a demonstration of that constant evolution we talked about. Just as Congolese rumba had absorbed Cuban influences, soukous took inspiration from American music,
Right.
proving that musical influence is a two-way street.
It's like a chain reaction of creativity, each generation building upon the legacy of the previous one. But amidst all of this musical evolution, there were so many talented musicians beyond the big names.
Right.
Our sources mention figures like Sam Mangwana and Mos Fan Fan. What were their contributions to this musical tapestry?
They were instrumental in shaping the sound and reach of Congolese music.
Okay.
Sam Mangwana, for example, was a vocalist who moved between various bands, lending his incredible voice to different styles. He became a beloved figure, connecting with fans across different musical landscapes. Mos Fan Fan was instrumental in bringing Congolese rumba to East Africa,
Wow.
specifically Kenya. His music blended so seamlessly with Kenyan sounds that it helped give birth to an entirely new genre, Kenyan benga.
It's remarkable how these artists not only shaped Congolese music, but also influenced musical landscapes far beyond Congo's borders.
Their stories highlight the far-reaching impact of this music. Think about it. You have Congolese rumba influencing the development of Kenyan benga, and you have soukous with its unmistakable Congolese roots making waves internationally.
It speaks to the power of this music to transcend borders and connect with people from different cultures.
It really does. And what's so fascinating is that this musical evolution wasn't limited to soukous in the 1990s. A new style called andambolo emerged, pushing the boundaries even further.
It sounds like this music never stood still, always finding new ways to express itself to reflect the changing times.
Exactly. It's a testament to the creativity and resilience of the Congolese people. And it raises an interesting question for our listeners.
Okay.
Think about the music you love.
Yeah.
How has it been shaped by other genres? What are the hidden influences that make it so unique?
That's a great point. It's always fascinating to trace the musical lineage of a song or a genre. We've talked a lot about the history and evolution of Congolese music, but I think our listeners are probably eager to actually hear some of this music.
Yeah.
Where would you suggest they start their exploration of Congolese rumba? What are some essential artists or songs they should check out? I know I'm ready to hear some tunes.
Yeah.
Where should our listeners start their Congolese rumba journey?
Well, there's so many great artists.
Right.
But if you're new to this music,
Yeah.
I think Franco is a must listen.
Okay.
His music spans decades and really captures the evolution of the genre. You might enjoy his earlier work like Liwa ya Lumumba.
Okay.
It's a powerful song that reflects the political turmoil of the time.
And for a taste of Franco's later, more politically charged music?
Kanda Biso Mobutu is a great example.
Okay.
You can really hear how music was used to support the regime during that era.
Right.
And of course, no exploration of Congolese rumba would be complete without Tabule Rochereau.
Yeah, what about him?
His music has a different feel, a bit more polished.
Okay.
With beautiful melodies and vocals, you should check out his collaborations with Orchestra Africa International, especially the songs featuring Mbilia Bell.
I've heard about Mbilia Bell, what made her such a standout vocalist.
Her voice is truly captivating.
Yeah.
She had this incredible range and a way of delivering lyrics with such emotion. But what really set her apart was her ability to blend traditional Congolese vocal styles with influences from other African musical traditions.
Oh, wow.
It created this unique sound that was both powerful and incredibly moving.
It sounds like she was a true innovator. So we've got Franco for the classic Rhumba sound.
Right.
Tabule with a bit more polish. What about for those who want to dive into soukous?
For soukous, you absolutely have to check out Zyko Longa Longa.
Okay.
They were pioneers of the genre, and their music is full of energy. And those infectious guitar lines,
Yeah.
albums like Avestir Recherche and Kwamwai, great places to start.
Okay.
What's fascinating about Zyko Longa Longa is how they managed to create music that was both incredibly danceable and musically complex.
So you could get lost in the rhythm, but there was also a lot going on musically beneath the surface.
Exactly. And you can't talk about Congolese music without mentioning Papa Wemba. He was a true icon, known for his flamboyant style and stage presence. But his music was equally captivating.
Yeah.
It's a mix of soukous, rumba, and other influences, creating a sound that was totally his own. Molokai is a great album to start with. You'll get a sense of his musical range and his ability to fuse different styles.
These are some fantastic recommendations. I'm already adding them to my playlist.
Nice.
But for those listeners who are already familiar with some of these Congolese music giants,
Right.
where should they go next?
Yeah.
What are some hidden gems or lesser-known artists that deserve more attention?
There's a whole world of Congolese music waiting to be discovered.
I bet.
If you want to go deeper, I encourage you to explore the discographies of the musicians we've already talked about. You'll find so many amazing tracks, but beyond the big names, you might enjoy exploring the work of Sam Mangwana.
Sam Mangwana.
He's the vocalist we mentioned earlier, who collaborated with so many different bands. His versatility and storytelling through music are incredible.
Okay, and for something a little different.
If you're feeling adventurous, check out Dr. Nico.
Dr. Nico.
He was guitarist and band leader who brought elements of rock and psychedelic music into Congolese rumba.
Wow.
His album Nico Kasanda is a wild ride.
I love that it speaks to the constant evolution and experimentation that we've been talking about.
Yeah,
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this fascinating world of Congolese rumba,
right.
I keep coming back to the question of how this joyful music managed to flourish under such a repressive regime.
It's a question that stays with me too.
Yeah.
I think it speaks to the resilience of the Congolese people and their deep love for music and dance. It's also a testament to the power of art to transcend even the most difficult circumstances.
It's a reminder that music can be a source of joy, connection, and even resistance, even in the face of oppression.
Exactly, and Congolese rumba, with its complex history and its incredible global reach, is a perfect example of that. It's a music that has not only reflected, but also shaped the social and political landscape of a nation.
So for our listeners, we leave you with this. We've explored the roots of Congolese rumba, its evolution, the artists who shaped it, and its journey beyond Congo's borders. But the story doesn't end there. This music continues to evolve, reflecting the changing realities of the Democratic Republic of Congo.
If this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, I encourage you to keep exploring, discover the music of contemporary Congolese artists, and see how they're carrying the torch of this vibrant tradition.
Thank you for joining us on this musical journey. Until next time, keep listening and keep exploring.
Mutombo